What's up? I'm Angie, and you are listening to Podcast That Pays, the podcast for online business owners who want to grow their business and sell their offers using podcasting. If you like no fluff, tell it like it is advice from a marketing-loving podcast agency owner, you are in the right place. So glad you're here. Let's dive in. Okay, so this is my absolute favorite thing to talk about when it comes to podcasting, and it is content, because content marketing is everything. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode that's about positioning, I want you to go back and listen to that one, because what I'm going over are the foundations that I believe help you to create a podcast that pays for your business so that you can sell your offers, grow your audience, all of that good stuff. So don't skip step one. Go back and listen to the last episode about positioning, and then come and listen to this one. Okay. So this is my very favorite thing to talk about, because this is the foundation of everything. This is where we begin for everything. This is where it begins. When I work with clients, no matter where they're starting in their process, if they're just getting ready to launch, they just barely have an idea, or they've been podcasting for a while, but things aren't working for them, or they're wanting to shake things up, or they're wanting to figure out why they can't convert and why things aren't quote unquote working for them. This is where we start with the last episode, positioning, and then with this one, content. Because if you do not have your positioning and your content right, you will not nail the piece of converting. As I'm recording this today in my group, there was someone who, and I feel so silly, like I'm talking about this again. Yes, I did a live about it. I did an Instagram story about it. I did everything about it. I'm talking about it. And I love just content tip, FYI. Great content tip in general for social media and everything is like, you should talk about those things when things spark something in you, or there's conversations going on in your community or whatever, or something sparks conversation. Those things you should talk about. Like, that's great content generation for you, right? And it's timely things. It's things that people are thinking about, who are in your community, who have seen you talk about, or it's being talked about, right? So it's great to create content around this. But someone in the group posted that she had just read an email from a business owner who was telling her that podcasting is the long game. It's how you build your brand, get visibility, you nurture your audience, but it is not a sales platform. You do not sell from podcasting. And bless this person's heart. I'm my Southern, oh, bless her heart. Like, bless her heart. There's no offense to that, because I believe opposite. Like, she's trying to sell something else that's like, she's positioning in a way that's better than podcasting. That's fine, but it's untrue for a lot of people. And what it makes me think is if that's truly true for you, then we need to talk. So I didn't even have to come into the post and say anything. Everyone in my group, if you're not a part of my group, I have a Facebook group called Launch, Grow, Explode Your Podcast on Facebook. There's about 4,000 people in there, and we have a good time. So people in the group just came and they were like, I sold such and such from my podcast. I sold such and such from my podcast. Like, I actually was a listener to a podcast the other day and I loved it so much. I joined the membership, one-time listening, like things and stories that prove the opposite. It's like, I need to go bookmark that thread. Actually, I think I will link that thread. Sarah, who's our wonderful podcast producer, when you listen to this, you would just grab that post and put that in the show notes so that people can see that as evidence. If you need evidence that shit does sell from your podcast, go to that link, go to that thread, get in the group, and just read the thread of all of the people who were in there saying all of the stuff that they sell from their podcast, which I loved, right? And so what conversation came up around that for me was, and I did a live video immediately after the conversation, and the conversation was, what content are you creating? If you are going into your podcast with the intention that you want to sell and you want to grow your business, it should look different. Your content should look different, right? Your content should be something that is going to convert. You shouldn't be up here talking about rainbows and butterflies and, oh my God, I'm just, here to inspire you and motivate you. No, because then you know what's going to happen. You are only going to inspire and motivate people, and they're not going to buy. And then you could just go ahead and put your podcast into the podcast graveyard of, I have this podcast, but it doesn't convert. But if you don't want your podcast to go over to podcast land of podcasts that don't convert or podcasts that get forgotten about and not loved because they're not getting an ROI, then you need to pay close attention to the content that you're producing. Okay. It's ridiculous to think that you don't. It's the most important piece is the content that you are creating. That's where it begins. That is where I will begin with all of my clients, no matter where they're at. I had a client once who already had a podcast with 4 million downloads. We started with her content, completely revamped it. Okay. So that's where we begin. This is why I love content. I love to create it for people. I love to create it with people. It's actually the place that I shine when I do my one-on-one calls with people. Is like, let me show you how to take these ideas and turn it into a season of content that's going to help sell your shit. Period. That is what we do. Hey, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, I really need to up my podcasting game, or you want to start utilizing your show more for your business to get more leads and sell more offers, then I want you to come over to podcastthatpays.com and check out the Podcast Collab Lab. That's podcastthatpays.com and check out what we're doing over there. I would love you to join us. Okay, back to the show. So here are some of my do not fucking do's, or pet peeves, if you want to call them, around your podcast content. Number one, having guests just to have guests. These people who live in the place of your podcast don't convert. This is one of the number one offenses. Stop having guests just to have guests. If your goal is to convert and sell shit to your people, stop having random Susie, Sally, John, James. Stop having them on your podcast. Like, your guests should still be helping you sell your shit. Shouldn't all be about, let's just have a random conversation, because random conversations, they're not going to get you paid. So stop having random guests. I remember once I had a biz bestie of mine. She had her podcast, and her podcast manager had recommended to her to have her friends on her podcast because it'll help with networking, which is not a bad thought, right? And so she did. And I just remember listening to the episode where she had one of her friends on, and I literally put in my notes, hire this person. Reach out to this person to hire them, not the friend, the biz bestie, the freaking person who she had on her podcast. And not only that, not only did I want to hire her guest, I still had no idea what she was selling in her podcast. And she was my freaking biz bestie. And I think that just illustrates it perfectly, how sometimes we just get caught up in doing things we think that we should be doing because we see other people doing it, or we think that's the way that podcasts are supposed to work. We got to have these guests, right? We got to have as many as possible, right? Wrong. And then we let the guests dictate what the episode is about. Wrong. You should be dictating what you want your listeners to experience, and then you give them that content. You make that guest fit in that box for you. Okay. I'll give you a quick tip about guests. 2 really good guests to have. 1, your clients, best guest to ever have. Okay. Can you please create an episode that is an entire testimonial? Like, why the fuck not if you're trying to sell, right? It's like, you talk to your clients, because then everybody sees you work with your clients. Everybody's going to see your clients' results. So it's like you're having an interesting conversation, and you are actually going to sell your shit, because you're showing people what it's like to work with you behind the scenes, right? You're pulling back that curtain. You're showing them, this is a business. Look, this is my client. This is what she got results. Let's talk about the things that she worked on to get her results. But at the same time, you are selling, right? It's a way to sell. The second type of guest you can have is an expert, someone who doesn't do exactly the same thing as you, but who supports what you do. An example would be if you're a health coach. If you're a health coach and maybe you stress to your audience the importance of sleep. And so maybe you find a naturopathic doctor or someone who is an expert on hormones. And so now they're the expert coming on, and we're talking about hormones, and we're talking about sleep, and what happens to your hormones when you don't get enough sleep versus what happens when it does. And so this expert has now made what you teach even more valid, has taught your audience something deeper, and is not in competition for you, and gives your audience a lot of value. And it's actually supporting what you do. Those are 2 great podcast guests to have. And those are only 2 I think you should have, to be honest. Okay. So guests, that's one of my old time pet peeves. Like, stop doing that shit. And then another pet peeve is, I know this is happening with some of you. What happens is on Monday, so let's say our podcast comes out on Tuesday, Monday night or Monday afternoon, we know that we have this podcast coming out on Tuesday. So we're like, oh my God, what can I talk about? What am I going to do? Or whatever. I mean, maybe it's not coming out on Tuesday, but we're like down to the wire. We got to put this shit out. but we have no idea what we want to talk about. And so we just literally pull something out of our ass that doesn't really go with anything in our business. It's just a topic. Let's talk about this topic, right? Which can be okay. But my point of that is, how much more effective, again, can the content that you create be if it was planned, strategized properly, if it had to do with your business, if it was in conjunction with what you're doing with your current marketing, if it supported that, if it all tied together, so it's working together for you and your business versus, oh shit, what topic can I pull out of my ass today to talk about because I have to do this podcast episode, right? So it's just a different way of looking at it. So cut that shit out. It's time to be looking at your shit in a holistic way and not in a way that is just per episode. And the last thing that's really rubs me the wrong way is, and I already touched on it in this last point, was just the idea that you're doing something separate than your entire business. Like if you're creating your podcast content and your social media content and all of your content marketing two different ways and they're not speaking to each other, then you are fucking it up. Like you're fucking it up. You're missing an opportunity to make this shit a whole lot easier for yourself. You're missing an opportunity to have cohesive content marketing that streamlines what you're doing and makes it easier. The whole point, my goal when I work with clients with their podcast is to make that shit easier for them. Is to have their podcast be something that is actually giving them more ease than making it feel like that's a whole additional thing that they have to do in their business. So yeah, those would be my pet peeves. Okay, here are the different ways you can look and create your content that could potentially help you jog ways that you can do your content. Number one, I love to create my content in seasons. I love to say, okay, what am I talking about this season? What am I creating this season? That's what I want. This is the goal of this season. You'll hear me talk about this if you're ever on a workshop with me, ever talking about content. I talk a lot about the goals. What is the fucking goal of the episode? What do we want people to leave with from this episode? What do we want to change their minds about? What do we want them to be thinking about? What do we want them to do? What is the goal of this episode? Same with the episode. What is the goal of this season? What do we want to do with this, right? So you can create your content based on an offer that you have. So now all of the questions that we begin to ask around creating content and what we want to talk about, if we're talking about an offer, then what are we talking about? What's the framework of the offer? What's the breakdown of what we're teaching them? What are objections people have to the offer? That's the kind of shit you can be talking about in your podcast episodes that you can outline that will make it cohesive and make it make sense and have it working for you. And it can work for you over and over again because you can create a podcast season about one offer and you could re-release episodes. You could release those episodes in a funnel. Like you can do so many things and reuse those episodes when you're selling that same offer again. All right? Saving time, creating ease for yourself, creating more time. People always talk about how time consuming podcasting is, but like if you do it the right way, it can actually streamline a lot of shit in your marketing and it can make it easy. Like I put in ChatGPT yesterday, take this transcript and write me a blog post. And it did. It wrote a whole blog post. Save time. What can we do to save time that people say it takes too much of to create a podcast? You can use your content in a smart way. Another way you can do is if you don't want to think about this and you don't want to do it in seasons, you can write out tips and tricks all you want, okay? So you can generate content like that. You can plan out Q&A episodes. That could be a type of content that you create. Q&A might be very valuable for what you do. Sharing client stories and feedback, very valuable, very valuable. And you can do interviewing clients. Like these are all ideas for your content, right? Now, those are ideas, and now I'm going to tell you what I do for mine. And I'm going to actually give you the fucking framework that I use with my clients, with all those people who are commenting saying they're making money from their podcast. I'm going to give you that fucking framework. This is what I teach inside of my membership. This is what I do for my one-on-one production clients. Here's the framework, okay? We're going 12 episodes. This is what I want you to do. Your first episode is an opening episode that is going to give us the mission. I call it the mission episode. It's going to tell us the mission of this freaking season. You can do this every season. What's the mission? Why are you doing this? Why should we care? Who's this for? What's the outcome? Why should people, latch onto this? Then your episodes 2 through 5 or 6, these are all, I want you to think of these as belief shifting, myth busting, stop, start doing episodes. So ask yourself these questions. What do you want your ideal client, your dream client to stop and start doing? if you could shake them, slap them, shake them into like reality, stop fucking doing this. What are those things? What are myths they currently believe about why they can't achieve this? Right. For me, one of those big ones is like, you can't start a podcast until you have a big audience. That's a myth. So I did a podcast episode about it because I want to shift how people believe. And then write down the myths. And then another one is like, what is the worst advice out there around your topic? What is the worst advice? So your episodes 2 through 6 or whatever can be all about that. Then you move on. So the third part would be your framework. So now that we like shifted people's beliefs with that second part, now, this part, let's tell them how we work. What's our system? What's our framework? Now that we told you what not to do, here's what to do. Here's the proprietary framework. Just like what I said, here is the framework that I use in my membership. So this is behind a paid curtain, whatever. This is like behind paid programs and people who pay me thousands of dollars to produce their podcast. Here you go, right? My framework. So I want you to own it like that. This is my framework, right? So you do your episodes like 6 through 11 on your framework and you break it down. You do your first episode as kind of like a overview of all of the steps, and then you break down each step and you're telling them why this is important, why they should incorporate this, why this matters. The reason why you want to do this is because you are building credibility, authority. You're showing them your way of doing things. You're giving them a glimpse into what it's like to work with you. Again, if you want to sell from your podcast, this is what we're doing. And then your last episode in this 12 episode season is your sales episode / your girlfriend chat. I started calling it a girlfriend chat and people just love it so much better than a sales episode. Now, a girlfriend chat, you can get with. Most people can get with. Most people don't want to do a sales episode. They want to do a girlfriend chat. And so what that means is like the girlfriend that you see fucking up and that you see that you can help. And you're like, I need to just pull her ass aside and tell her the truth. That's who I want you to act like you're talking to in this episode. So who needs you? I want you to act like you're talking to her. Like, let's have a heart to heart, come to Jesus, girlfriend chat. Let me just be honest and tell you, if nothing changes, nothing changes. If you keep doing this, this is the result you're going to get. If you don't take a solution, this is what's going to happen. This is what I've seen happen. This is why it's so urgent for you to act now. This is why you need support versus trying to do this on your own and getting information on your own. That's the kind of stuff you need to do in a sales episode, right? In your girlfriend chat. So that was my framework in a very quick way of my content and how I create content over and over and over for everyone. And I want you to understand that this framework is not for everybody. The way I teach is not for everybody. This is for you. If you have a business and you want to sell your shit from your podcast, this is for you. If you have a business and you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about and you don't want it to tie back to your business, this ain't for you. We can create and be creative and figure something else out to eventually monetize you, and that's fine. But this ain't for you. So you know this is for you. If this is calling to you, if you know you need to go deeper, if you know your content fucking sucks and you need an overhaul, you need to carry your ass to podcastthatpays.com. Go get in my membership, $10 fucking a month. $10 a month. Okay. You can get access to this information. You can get access to a community, a group. We do coaching, we do co-working, we hang out, answer questions, we help each other. Like, that's what you need to do to get started. So you should do that. And after this episode, if you liked it and you want to talk to me again, or you're mad because I kept cursing you out and dragging you, whatever. But if you want to talk to me, come over to my Instagram at Angie M. Jordan, because I love to talk to you. Come in my DMs, say hi, tell me what you think about this episode. Okay. So just remember, content is where it all starts. This is where it begins. And just to leave you with this one thought, another thing to think about is we ain't all come out the womb or out the podcast womb, the new podcast womb. Great podcasters, great content creators, great at doing interviews, skilled at doing episodes where we can include all of the things that I teach you to include. It don't happen overnight. It is 1,000% a practice. It is 1,000% about getting into your groove. It's just like becoming a great writer. The more you write, the better that you become. This is the same thing. You have to do it in practice. You are never going to sit there and sketch out and write out the best episodes ever, sitting there writing and not talking. and not getting in your flow of how you use notes and how you map things out and what works for you and what feels good, what helps to keep you going on your episodes. You're never going to get into that flow if you don't start recording. If you're not ready to record real time and you just want to practice, I say go in your voice notes and knock yourself out. That's actually really good practice. That's actually better than writing the shit down, because that is how you're going to get more used to how you like to create and make sure that you're including everything and understand what kind of notes that you need going into an episode and understanding how to hit all these points that we talk about hitting, right? That's a personal journey for you. All right. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Thank you so much for being here, listening. As always, if you love the show, even if you like it a little bit, go write me a review. It helps a fuck ton. I'm serious. And also go do that for all your favorite podcasters because it really helps. We're out here creating. I'm in here in this closet, sweating my ass off, creating this episode as we speak. So just a little review goes a long way. And I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, head over to podcastthatpays.com to get started on your way to creating a podcast that pays. And don't forget to follow this show and take a screenshot that you were listening and tag me on Instagram at Angie M. Jordan. I'd love to meet you and show you some love over there. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. Let's get this money.